This is today's Cyber News for November 7th, 2025. You can also subscribe to the newsletter and view the archive of previous headlines at dailycyber.news. Klopp claims it breached the Washington Post and stole internal data, posting the allegation to its public leak site while the publisher works to verify what, if anything, was actually taken. Even before proof arrives, a claim like this can trigger convincing lures that reference real beats, editorial workflows, and vendor relationships to extract more access or money from anxious targets. The business risk extends beyond the newsroom because legal teams, outside contractors, and subscription operations often share documents and credentials that an extortion crew can exploit in follow-on fraud. The tactic is to weaponize brand trust and existing email patterns so that forged invoices, policy notices, or document requests look deceptively routine to busy staff under deadline pressure. Verification is still underway at the publisher, and the group's next move typically hinges on whether fresh attention and panic yield leverage without the need to post meaningful proof. Analysts attributed a new wave of destructive activity in Ukraine to sandworm, with data wipers deployed against parts of the grain sector along with education and government networks, which translates into missing files, corrupted records, and long days of manual work to restore even basic services. When a wiper hits a production environment, the effect is not only digital, because logistics and safety decisions suddenly lack the information these systems normally provide to operators and planners. The campaign appears tuned for disruption rather than espionage, with tooling adjusted per target and repeated bursts aimed at straining recovery teams and supply chains that are already under stress. Organizations that run flat networks or share administrative domains across business units are more likely to see the malware move quickly and erase key systems before controls can slow it down. Authorities and private responders are publishing containment guidance while local teams stage offline rebuilds and test their ability to restore from immutable backups under tight time constraints. Researchers disclosed weaknesses in popular chat platforms that could allow attackers to extract private data and reopen prior sessions for longer than intended, with risks amplified by third-party integrations and inconsistent token scoping that together create more paths to reach sensitive prompts in documents. In certain configurations, a reused cookie or access token can revive a previous session in a way that quietly persists across devices, which undermines the assumption that a single logout or browser close reliably ends access. Because these services now sit next to source code, internal notes, and uploaded customer content, a privacy miss inside the chat layer can spill into a real data breach that must be disclosed. Teams that enable many plugins without a review process or that casually share credentials across profiles and shared machines will feel the most pressure to clean up and rotate secrets after an incident. Providers and plugin authors have begun shipping fixes and guidance, while enterprise administrators shorten token lifetimes, prune integrations to a vetted list, and test that sign-out actually invalidates access everywhere. Google's threat team warned about malware that mutates during execution, which means the payload can alter indicators, swap modules, and call remote logic to change behavior in ways that frustrate static signatures and basic sandboxing. This adaptive approach raises the cost for defenders because rules that match a particular file or hash quickly lose value when a program rewrites itself or fetches fresh pieces after it lands. Enterprises that still lean heavily on signature-focused tools without robust behavior analytics, script control, or telemetry tuned for process chains will see blind spots widen as these families iterate in the wild. The practical answer is to detect what malicious tools do rather than what a specific sample looks like, with controls that watch script hosts, module loads, and parent-child relationships that betray staged execution. Research teams are tracking families testing these techniques across sectors, and operations groups are tightening the loop from first detection to deployed behavioral rules so coverage keeps pace. A malicious extension for Visual Studio Code, VS Code, briefly made it into the official marketplace and delivered ransomware behaviors after installation, which is a stark reminder that developer tools sit on the keys to products, cloud resources, and sensitive repositories. The listing used a plausible name and description to win rapid trust, then reached out after the first run to fetch a second stage that could encrypt files and siphon credentials from a workstation with broad access. Because many organizations allow developers to install extensions freely, and because terminals and browsers often share tokens and sessions, a poisoned add-on can ripple across code and infrastructure with little early warning. The cleanup is not only about removing one extension, since teams also need to review accounts tied to that machine, scan for remnants, and reset any tokens that may have been exposed by the editor process. The marketplace entry has been removed and maintainer accounts are under review, while engineering leaders adopt allow lists and monitoring that treat the integrated development environment, IDE, as a high-risk pathway rather than a purely local convenience. Attackers are hiding command traffic inside trusted management plumbing by blending malware instructions with ordinary device actions over AirWatch, which is part of Workspace ONE Unified Endpoint Management, so the stream of tasks looks like routine fleet administration, even as operators quietly push control messages that slip past simple block lists and many proxy rules. The technique depends on stolen or overprivileged application programming interface tokens that let adversaries impersonate administrators and issue commands that mirror real workflows, which means volume and timing are often the only early tells that something is wrong. Because many enterprises grant long-lived keys and central tools enjoy implicit trust, the covert channel persists while analysts chase other alerts, and the threat actor accumulates small advantages that add up to durable control. This matters for any team that treats management networks as safe by default, since visibility gaps grow widest exactly where defenders expect clean traffic and minimal friction. Investigators recommend rotating credentials, narrowing scopes, and baselining per-tenant command patterns so that a spike in send command activity during off hours becomes a loud, unmistakable signal rather than background noise. Researchers describe curly comrades enabling Microsoft Hyper-V on compromised Windows hosts, creating tiny Linux virtual machines that run shells and proxies out of sight, and then forwarding traffic through virtual switches that blend neatly with ordinary workstation use, which leaves many endpoint tools watching the wrong place. Because payloads execute inside the guest rather than the host, process trees, file writes, and command histories that would normally light up detections never appear to the agent unless a sensor exists within the virtual machine, which remains uncommon on user laptops. Persistence survives reboots through Hyper-V configuration and scheduled tasks, while administrative tooling that seems routine to the desktop user becomes the cloak that keeps the operator's foothold quiet and resilient. The net effect is a stealth layer that defeats host-only visibility models and turns consumer virtualization features into covert infrastructure without adding obvious drivers or kernel hooks. Defenders are urged to block Hyper-V on user endpoints by policy, alert on new guests and virtual switches outside maintenance windows, and place targeted coverage where virtualization cannot be disabled, because anything less leaves a spacious blind spot that determined actors will exploit. A growing click-fix social engineering pattern now arrives with short tutorial videos, countdown timers, and platform-aware scripts that guide anxious users through self-infection step by step, which effectively replaces exploits with coaching that feels like helpful support while quietly turning off safeguards. The lures present believable problems and promise quick relief if the victim runs a command, fetches a file, or pastes a one-liner tailored for Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. And the cadence of prompts keeps the target moving so doubt never gets a foothold. Because the payloads often come from public file sharing or paste services, and the commands look like routine diagnostics, many controls stay quiet until a loader lands and phones home, at which point credentials and data begin to flow. This approach works best on roles under time pressure, support desks, sales, and small IT teams, who are conditioned to fix issues fast and who may view unsigned scripts as harmless shortcuts when a customer is waiting. The durable countermeasure is policy and muscle memory. Block unsigned script execution, constrain interpreters, log full command lines, and train people to recognize the cadence of coercion so that a calm refusal becomes the default rather than the exception. Cloudflare removed domains tied to the Isuru botnet from a widely watched popularity list after discovering the network inflated rankings while hammering the domain name system, which matters because many organizations and tools treat popularity as a proxy for safety and build allow lists that inherit those assumptions. By gaming a metric that defenders trust, the operators created temporary safe passage for traffic that blended into seen everywhere patterns. And that camouflage made it easier to probe targets and push abusive requests without triggering crude reputation checks. The cleanup underscores how brittle single-signal defenses can be when adversaries tune their operations to the heuristics that keep noise down for everyone else. Teams that automatically allow or prioritize domains based solely on rank should re-examine that dependency, add layered scoring, and quarantine traffic to newly popular destinations until corroborating signals say otherwise. In practice, the fix means watching resolver logs for sudden query bursts from Internet of Things segments, inspecting outbound floods tied to lightweight clients, and refusing to treat popularity as anything more than one hint among many in a risk score that changes with context. Investigators report that Kim Suk-hee is abusing developer ecosystems by turning Visual Studio Code, VS Code, extensions, and hosted repositories on GitHub into quiet command hubs that blend with ordinary project activity and routine commits. The scheme relies on the Integrated Development Environment, IDE, polling seemingly benign gists or issues for tasking, and then posting results in ways that look like normal collaboration rather than a control channel that deserves scrutiny. The approach is dangerous for teams that allow any extension to install freely and for organizations that permit personal access tokens, PATs, with broad scopes that linger far past their original need. This tactic matters because developer workstations sit on the keys to cloud accounts and production code, which means a single poisoned extension can pry open build systems and staging environments without throwing obvious security errors. Defenders are tightening extension allow lists, shrinking token scopes and lifetimes, and adding monitoring that treats editor network traffic as a sensitive pathway rather than a harmless background process. Threat researchers detail an Iran-aligned campaign that lures academics and policy experts into installing legitimate remote monitoring and management (RMM) tools which grant operators durable visibility without triggering classic malware alarms or noisy privilege escalations. The social engineering begins with very plausible outreach that impersonates journals or conferences and then moves the target through troubleshooting steps that end with unattended access agents running quietly in the background. This works so well because the victim believes they are fixing a simple compatibility issue, while the software delivers file collection, keystroke viewing, and microphone checks that provide ongoing surveillance without code injection. The impact lands hardest on universities, think tanks, and diaspora groups that allow staff to self-install software and accept outside support sessions without tickets or pre-approval. Administrators are now blocking unknown remote tools, inventorying existing agents, and enforcing policies that require a help desk record and multi-factor authentication (MFA) for any remote support session that touches a sensitive endpoint. Ukrainian organizations report spear phishing waves that deliver counterfeit ESET installers, which quietly drop a custom backdoor known as Kolumbor, and the rogue packages imitate security updates convincingly enough to bypass casual review on busy workstations. Once the fake installer runs, persistence and beaconing components arrive, and responders observe command exfiltration, file exfiltration, and tampering with local security settings that gradually degrade defenses while the operator explores the environment. The campaign preys on teams with decentralized software updates and staff who are conditioned to accept urgent fixes from unsolicited email prompts that appear to come from trusted vendors. This matters because a trusted brand turned into a delivery vehicle undermines endpoint baselines and sparks lateral movement that is difficult to detect using host-only signals. Security leaders are tightening update channels to official in-product paths or managed repositories, and are verifying digital signatures from vendor certificate authorities before any installer is allowed onto the corporate network. The long-running bootloader operation refreshed its entry path with archive-based stagers that unfold only after user interaction, which defeats automated sandboxes and defers telltale network calls until the attacker's script chain is well underway. The crew continues to poison search results with legal theme documents and similar lures. But the downloaded zip now triggers script hosts and registry tweaks that prepare the system for payload retrieval later, which reduces early telemetry and hides the real handoff. This approach punishes environments that keep Windows Script Host, WSH, and unrestricted PowerShell available without strong controls, because the infection proceeds through what looks like user activity rather than a self-starting exploit. The operational danger grows when defenders lean on sandbox verdicts alone and do not monitor process chains from download folders into script interpreters that then reach out to unfamiliar domains. Enterprises are responding by enforcing signed script policies, turning on application allow listing, and alerting on WS script or PowerShell processes launched from recent extraction paths tied to user profile directories. Analysts track a campaign that delivers the Valley Rat Remote Access Trojan, RAT, through WeChat and DingTalk messages and installers that imitate normal updates inside Chinese language business ecosystems where these platforms are deeply embedded. The infection chain stages loaders that perform basic checks and then fetch the core controller, after which the malware blends with chat application processes while enabling credential theft, file access, and quiet screen capture against users who believe they are updating a familiar tool. The risk concentrates in finance, procurement, and sales roles that routinely exchange documents over messaging and are accustomed to running small helper programs to keep workflows moving. This matters because the chat environment becomes both the social cover and the technical pathway for durable access, which makes incident scoping difficult when malicious activity hides among legitimate conversations and trusted executables. Defenders are pushing policies that block software delivery over chat, restrict execution inside chat application folders, and require code signing plus explicit approvals for any update mechanism that ships through a messaging client. That's the Bare Metal Cyber Daily Brief for November 7th, 2025. For more, visit baremetalcyber.com. You can also subscribe to the newsletter and view the archive of previous headlines at dailycybernews.com. We're back tomorrow.